Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Warnham. I'm from Total Jobs Group. I'm the Content and Communications Manager there. And I'm here to talk to you today about some new Total Jobs research into the reversal of the brain drain and how COVID-19 is changing UK migration trends. So a quick agenda for today. What I want to do is to, give a bit of a state of play for how the economy is currently looking, and then go into the research we conducted in February of this year with Professor of Economics Geraint Jones from the University of Lancaster, and then go into some research we've done since the outbreak of COVID-19 into how this has changed essentially, and obviously of huge importance. You can see there what this means for you and your business. There's a chance to submit your questions, which you can pop into the chat box, and we'll come back to you with those when we can. So, as I said, on to the state of play. So, the first thing to note is obviously we have unfortunately entered a recession for the first time since the financial crisis of 2008. But what's key is that, this is heavily linked to the lockdown period. So, spending from households and businesses dropped by a quarter in Q2. So essentially, this had a knock-on impact, and we're starting to see that now in terms of the ONS figures coming out. However, as lockdowns began to ease, we've started to see recovery in the economy. So in July, retail sales rose above pre-pandemic levels, and we know, and many of us may well have enjoyed this ourselves, but over half of the UK has taken part in the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which is believed to have saved up to 2 million jobs. Many of you will be aware that students are returning to schools. Many of you will probably be very grateful for that as well. And in terms of jobs, Rishi Sunak's Plan for Jobs 2020 includes many initiatives, including, say, the Kickstart scheme, which is a £2 billion investment, which sees those on universal credit between the ages of 16 and 24 given 6 months work placements, with their wages being subsidised by the government. In terms of the labour market, what we're seeing on total jobs, and this graph's quite interesting, I think, in terms of the latest ONS unemployment figures, they are currently at 3.9%, whilst the Bank of England predicts that this will go up to 7.5% before the end of the year. On total jobs, as you can see on the graph, when lockdown was instilled towards the end of March, there was quite a sudden dramatic drop in the number of vacancies being advertised on site. However, this is now both up 29% in both August and July compared to June. So you can actually see that sort of curve is starting to take that upward trend and really follow the rate that we're seeing in the wider economy as well. In terms of the highest volume of jobs being advertised, we're seeing this across industries such as IT, social care, logistics, and the skilled trades. It's imperative for the continued recovery of the economy that these will continue to be invested in by employers. So on to the reversal of the brain drain. Essentially, in a nutshell, what it is young workers in London are becoming disillusioned of life in the city. They are planning to move out of the capital, whether for personal, professional, or financial reasons. And this is going to have a knock-on effect on the makeup of the workforce of London. In fact, we found in February that over half of young workers in the capital were actually willing to relocate. So before we get on to what the reversal of the brain drain is, it's really important that we sort of touch on the brain drain in itself. So as you can see on the screen right now, the sort of key stat is essentially 1 in 3 graduates in the UK move to London after finishing their studies. This is the brain drain. The impact this will have on local businesses in the regions, in the north, the west, and the east, is hard to measure. But essentially, we know from research up until the outbreak of COVID-19 that 3/4 of businesses were struggling to find the people they need to hire. And a big part of this is essentially people get training, skills, study, and they all flock to one place, that place being London. What's really also interesting as part of this as well is that research by our sister company Milkround found that 3/4 of young graduates think that the best job opportunities are in London, so that's where they have to go. This was research conducted earlier in the year, and what's really telling and linking back to some of the themes we'll touch upon later in this talk is actually that the average cost of moving to London for these young workers was over £2,500, and only a third of those could actually afford to make this move. So when you consider some of the factors we're talking about, there's a huge cost of moving to London, and actually some of the things that we've certainly seen drive this change, it really sort of part of the same cycle essentially. So what is driving them to London? Well, I think much of this will probably be no sort of huge surprise. You can see job opportunities are a big factor, and a specific job offer. Sorry. There's also higher salaries at play. And then there's the London lifestyle. I know from personal experience myself and a lot of the people I know, I moved to London when I was 21, 22. A big part of it was I want to be on the tube. I want to be able to get to bars, my friends, theatres, so on and so forth. So, that's a real thing that we're seeing in your workforce. And, 8 years down the line, I'm a 30-year-old person working for Total Jobs. That was what essentially drove me to London in the first place. But what is driving people out of London essentially is the reverse of that. I mean, we're seeing young workers becoming disillusioned with life in the capital, and you can see some of the stats there that 1 in 4 young workers in London plan to move out the capital. ONS figures that we've analysed show that there's been a huge increase in the number of people in their 20s leaving in the last 3 years, and similarly an even bigger increase in those in their 30s moving out. So some of those workers, particularly around the 25 to 34 age range, result in what is quite a shocking net outflow of 88 workers every day, which is quite a large figure for the whole city, but the impact this will have on your business is something that's really keen that we keep in mind. And I think 43% of the people we spoke to at Total Jobs told us that they were looking to move out before they turned 33. That's 1 million people looking to leave London before they turn 33, and that's kind of, oh yeah, okay, sure, fine. But when we analyse ONS figures, what we found that was 2/3 of those actually moved to non-commutable distances. So they're not necessarily going to North Kent, they're actually going to the north of England, and the impact this will have on business is huge. So what is moving millennials out of London? Well, again, drawing on personal experiences, is many of the things I've had in conversations with my friends who've decided to up sticks and move, whether to the countryside or back to their hometown or their partner's hometown. It's these core factors. They're looking to reduce the cost of living. Many think it's unrealistic they'll ever own a property in London. And there's also, more emotive factors at play, such as wanting to start a family, spend more time with their family, even things such as, whereas it might have been a desire to be near the nearest and best bars, actually it's near the best schools that's actually going to sort of be the factors as we head into their 30s. Drawing on some research we conducted last year, also with Geraint Johns from the University of Lancaster, we found that for every £1 earned in London was worth £1.20 in the north. That's taking into account the cost of a commute, the time spent commuting, the amount of rent paid, and the cost of owning a home. Essentially confirming what we all know, that money goes further up north, and this is something that's actually starting to play into the minds and the thoughts and the drivers of workers in the capital. Similarly, our research has found that with the devolution of power, both in government and if you think about sort of businesses as well, you've got Amazon moving to Cambridge, Channel 4 to Leeds. There's this perception that careers outside the capital are much better than they were 5 years ago. So half of millennials believe that these job prospects are improving, and the same amount, 53%, are actually actively looking for that role, which I think really signals that this isn't necessarily just a sentiment of, oh, it'd be nice to up sticks and move to the countryside. People are actively looking for these jobs and this chance to move. And I probably don't need to go into the sort of ins and outs of it all, because I'm sure you'll all be more than well aware of the impact of COVID-19. It's undeniably going to affect every trend we were seeing in the economy, in society, politically, globally. And generally speaking, it will stop it in its tracks or reverse it, which I guess would be the reversal of the brain drain, or accelerate it, which is what we're seeing with this, where essentially we know that COVID-19 is going to speed this trend up. So what's really telling as part of this is that 38% of people we spoke to in February, or of young workers, said they want to move. They want to move out of the city, be near better schools, have somewhere they could have more space, but it was their job holding them back. And we know that 20 million people, according to ONS figures, had never worked remotely before the outbreak of COVID-19. However, now to this day, when I'm speaking to you in September, 25% of the workforce continue to work from home full time. So whilst many people might be going back into the office either part-time or full-time even, there's still huge swathes of the workforce that actually, they've been working from home for the last 6 months or so, and the impact that's going to have is huge. So as a result of this, and this is something we've seen across a range of total jobs research, people are taking stock of their options. And many people have unfortunately found themselves out of work. But aside from this, 2/3 of people are reevaluating their career as a whole. And then you've got people considering where they live. So 38% of people, because of COVID-19, are actually thinking about, oh, is this where we want to settle down? Is this where I want to base myself? And a big part of this is due to the ways we've been working. Our research shows that 1.6 million Londoners have worked outside the capital in the last few months, and they don't want to go back. They've actually seen how moving either to their parents' house or their partner's parents' house up north allows them to have more green space, more time, and a better quality of life for many people. And the upshot of this, and I guess this is the main thing to really take, is that 27% of Londoners, considering we've talked about this sort of growing desire among young workers, 27% want to move out of London earlier than they originally planned. So when you consider, the huge amount of people that plan to move out before they're 33, this is shrinking. So in terms of your workforce, you've got your growing sort of mid-management level of these aging millennials who are increasingly having their head turned by moving elsewhere, having a greater opportunity to sort of spread their wings and essentially enjoy a new stage of their life. And then if you consider where to, that sort of doubles down this as well. I mean, I think it's certainly something I've experienced. I'm currently at home in my parents' house where I talk to you from, but essentially city living has been challenging over the last few months. We've got people who want to live in a more rural area, whether that's the countryside or even just the suburbs, because it's that key driver of more outside space and a bigger area in which to call home. Because particularly when home is also where you work, that's going to have that key driver for the change that these people want to make. So, as I've said, there's a huge opportunity for businesses. There's challenges we need to face as well, but the key things that really jump out to us is that first one, front and center, embrace flexibility where you can. You can see here that long-term flexibility, so whether that's changing working patterns in terms of the hours they work, but predominantly that long-term ability to work remotely would actually allow 1/3 of people to move across the UK. 43% of Londoners said that actually if their employer allowed them to work remotely, full-time, or certainly the majority of the time, this would allow them to move, which they want to do anyway, but still keep working with their employer. Similarly, I guess that sort of desire to be in a more affordable area and reduce living costs. I think from an employer's perspective, when actually not just attracting and retaining talent, there's a real opportunity to sort of offer the best and actually work not necessarily being the driver of where people want to live, but actually just to go alongside that, which will allow you to attract the best people and have a wider talent pool in the process. Obviously, we need to acknowledge that not every job can be done remotely. So for on-site roles, whether it's logistics or hospitality, social care, healthcare, whatever it may be, these are the key things that young workers told us would encourage them to stay in London. Salary benchmarking is obviously a factor, making sure that what you pay people is fair and allows them to live in the city they live, and also is equal to the work they do in the industry they do in the field they specialize in. Similarly, support with travel costs. 28% of people say, brilliant, cool. So if I had a help with my commute, if I had a travel season ticket loan, for example, I'd be able to move to some of these areas I spoke about earlier, like North Kent, and actually still travel into the city for work. Childcare support is a key factor, and it's probably also worth mentioning that even for those roles that aren't necessarily on site but can be done remotely, salary benchmarking and child support, if you do want your workforce, even if they are predominantly remote, to still be based in London, these are key factors where the financial burden of childcare is pushing people away. And actually, if you're able to help with that cost, or even, as we've touched upon, that flexibility, which allows people to, take their kids to school, as the case may be at the moment, that would be a really great way to keep hold of the best talent. And then similarly, as I touched upon, only 1/3 of graduates can afford that, that move to London. So that sort of financial support and the relocation packages could be pivotal. And the relocation allowance is a tax benefit of up to £8,000, which allows you to sort of attract these people to the capital, to where you're based, and essentially make sure that London doesn't necessarily lose all its movers and shakers, and we can still keep getting that sort of great influx of graduate talent. So the key takeaways for me today, essentially, as I've touched upon, trends aren't changing, they are accelerating. So this is something that is not hopefully for you, you found it interesting, but it's not just, oh, that's interesting. This will impact your business. Essentially, if you've got workers who are, the right side of 35, they will be considering this. They'll be at home having these conversations with their partners, possibly even with their families. Where do they want to base themselves? So you need to take stock of this and consider this. Similarly, it's not all a desire and a need to retain people. Location doesn't necessarily have to be a barrier to your hiring anymore. You've got a real opportunity to, whether you're based in London or the region, to really cast the net wide. You could, if you're based in Manchester, attract people from London. And similarly, if you're based in London, but you've got an ongoing remote workforce and you're looking for a Java developer and you're really struggling to find the right person, you don't necessarily need to find someone who's based in London. Location is actually decreasingly a factor in the way we work. And I think that gives a real sort of opportunity for businesses to make sure that they find the right person, regardless of where they're actually based. Similarly, and I can't stress this enough, flexibility is key. That's really going to be the main factor for making sure that actually you keep hold of the best talent. And similarly, mobility across the UK is going to happen. So actually, any way you could support relocation, whether it's even, an advance on the first paycheck, whatever that may be, to help with that rental, first rent date, would be brilliant in terms of making sure that sort of young talent comes through. So in terms of this talk, I'd really encourage you all to visit totaljobs.com/recruiter-advice, where we've got advice on how to implement a flexible working strategy, how to best work remotely, how to offer a relocation package. There's plenty of great content, and also there's the full report on the reversal of the brain drain that we've recently updated in line with COVID-19.